Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. David Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. David is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David.
Welcome home from your fantastic India trip.
Yeah, thank you so much. Where I had a 3-day training with the Dalai Lama, and now I have lots more information to add to the podcast.
And you were teaching with Dipti
Joshi. We taught in Ahmedabad, and we taught to graduate students and undergraduate psychology students, and we taught to medical students and psychiatric residents and psychiatrists in 2 different schools, Heather Clegg and I. And then we also taught an all-day class to therapists and one lawyer and people who have already started studying TEAM-CBT and are certified in the TEAM-CBT hierarchy.
That's really neat. And so Dipti is going to be creating the first TEAM-CBT training and treatment center in India.
Well, actually, she just emailed us today and said they're going to be calling it the Feeling Good Institute of Asia. So that
That's
they want
fantastic. The Feeling Good Institute of Asia. What a great name. And who is she going to be working with? Nivet?
Yes, her friend.
Nivet, you can pronounce it.
Actually, I don't.
Nivedita. Nivedita. And what's her last name? Singh?
She is...
Nivedita Singh.
I can look it up.
Well,
yes.
Anyway, she's a...
Nivedita Singh.
Yeah, right. And she came all the way to Atlanta to attend the intensive, which, by the way, was huge.
That's great.
It was just fantastic. And we're going to, as you know, be interviewing Michael, who was the live demo there. And he was so mind-blowing. Unfortunately, we didn't get a good enough audio to broadcast it as a podcast, but he's going to come up here later this month and stay over at my house. And you and I are going to interview him after a Sunday hike about that amazing
Well, I think Nivedita and Dipti are going to be coming next year to San Francisco's intensive.
Oh, that's cool.
And we're going to try and see if we can get some more Indians and people from Asia to come.
And in fact, maybe you listeners can give us some tips here. I had proposed for next year's intensive an intimacy intensive, 4 days with the 5 secrets of effective communication, showing therapists, here's how to improve your relationships with clients. Here's how to teach clients who have relationship problems, how to teach them the interpersonal model. And also here's how you therapists can learn to deal with your own relationship issues. And I thought that would be exciting and fully a huge package for 4 days. 4 days of training with 5 secrets is what therapists need. And if some general public snuck in, I sure wouldn't kick them out.
Yeah, I think that'd be really exciting.
But I proposed this both to Jack Hiroshi, who sponsors my Canadian workshops, and also Spencer Smith, who with Praxis, who does the South San Francisco intensive. And they both said, we don't want to do a couples therapy workshop. No one will come. And that blew my mind because it's not a couples therapy workshop. It's an intimacy training for individuals who want to improve relationships, and it's a hugely important topic. It could be a life-changing intensive. So if you're interested in coming, why don't you email me so I can have some ammunition? Because I'd love to give an all-new intensive. I've been doing depression and anxiety for the past 5 years or more, 10 years, and I think it'd be great to offer something entirely fresh and different and awesome. So let me know if you have the interest. I can always go back to some version of the old workshop again, but
I think it would be really exciting. And that's what we taught when we were in India, and people just ate it up.
Yeah, right. So here we are into number 175, and we have a bunch of Ask David questions.
Well, David, before we start that, can I read some endorsements that we got from after our episode 160, which was on listening to the music of TEAM? That's where Brandon Vance and Heather Clegg sang songs about the TEAM concepts.
And you're wondering if you can read some endorsements?
Yeah, you got some really sweet emails about that
The
podcast.
answer is no.
I must overrule you.
Yes, tell us what they said about those wonderful podcasts by Brandon and Heather.
Okay, well, here's one that came from someone named Indrani, and she wrote, "This is one of my favorite podcasts. Heather, Brandon, Rhonda, and David, you created magic. It also helped me attack my own shame. During one of Heather's songs about not being good enough, tears rolled down my eyes. And I was at the gym. I saw the stairs but continued listening, and then it happened again when Brandon sang Tiny Anna. Oh, so for now I'm cured of feeling embarrassed and out of place. ? Happy face. I love assigning podcasts as homework like Heather mentioned, but this one was just for me. It was a bonus to hear David sing. Thank you."
Oh, that's so
That was a really great one.
Beautiful.
And this is one from Donna, who's also a team therapist, and she wrote to you and said, "Congratulations, Heather and Brandon. You guys are amazing and sound fabulous. Thanks for the gift of your writing and your music."
Beautiful.
Yeah, that was fun. And then another team therapist, Tyann, who wrote...
And Tyann was in Atlanta, and she was my co-therapist
She
for
was.
the live demo there, and it was like pure magic.
That's awesome.
She is so awesome.
That's fantastic. Well, she wrote, "Just had a chance to listen to episode 160. What a fun episode. Beautiful voices and harmonies. Never thought I'd hear a song with the magic button and positive reframe." Another happy face. "Thanks for your vulnerabilities as well as with the feelings of failure. Very connecting. Congratulations, Heather and Brandon. All the best, Tyann."
Yeah.
So those are very sweet.
Yeah, I'm just amazed and grateful for all the people in our team community and all the creativity that's going on, and you and Heather with your ventures to different countries to get teams started. You started with Mexico a couple months ago, and then the whole month of December in India. It's really amazing, and our listeners I think I'm in love with our listeners. That you have been so warm and thoughtful and supportive in your questions, and it's been a great help. One special thanks I have for all of you listeners, and we'll get on to the great questions in just a second, but I had asked some of you to, if you have a mailing list of any group that you're in, a church group, a synagogue group, or whatever, if you're a member of some kind of group, send them a link to www.feelinggood.com to the workshop tab. And to the list, actually, the list of Feeling Good podcasts,
yeah,
because it's entirely free, and this will really help us grow our audience. And a couple of you have done this since I first requested it a number of weeks ago, and when people do this, it leads to a huge bounce and downloads of podcasts as well as hits on my website. And this really helps us tremendously. In the last 2 months, we've averaged more than 100,000 podcasts per month for the last 2 months for the first time. And now December, right now we're recording this one, it won't come out in December, but we're recording it here on December 3rd. December already looks like it might, now this is a might, but so far it looks like it'll be even bigger than either of the last 2 months.
Yeah, and you don't have any professional, like public relations person working to push these.
No. So you folks are our only marketing arm right now. Now, pretty soon, Michael Simpson, who was featured in the podcast
from this week.
Yeah, from this week. He's going to be helping me with that optimization of the website when we publish the new and radically revised Feeling Good website. But you folks spreading by word of mouth or just telling people, but sending that link to the list of Feeling Good podcasts at www.feelinggood.com. And if you go there, you can get that link. I'll put the link in the show notes too.
Great.
Then we get hundreds, if not thousands, of new people coming into the fold.
Yeah, that's neat.
So what's?
So I think we're going to do maybe this entire podcast based on one letter that you received, because it's such a ripe letter full of a lot of really information, that we can just mine for interesting information.
So this is the one, what if I really am a useless human being? And that's a good depression thought. And Some people might think, what if I really am a worthless human being? What if I really am inferior?
What if I really am not good enough?
Yeah, I'm not good enough. What if I really am hopeless? But there's some cool twists to this question.
Yeah,
So,
so why don't I read it off? Dear Dr. Burns, I've been listening to your podcast for 6 months now, and it's been so helpful with my work as a therapist as well as my personal life. I'm starting to develop a habit of considering every unwanted state with, quote, what does it say about me? What does it say that's awesome about me? Unquote. And I'm much happier now. I'm wondering if you'd consider helping me some more. I have a client who's been struggling with depression for many years. At the moment, he's doing okay and his mood is up. Lately, the topic of his uselessness came up again, and he's willing to work on that. He said he'd consider the possibility that he's not a useless human being and asked me not to dismiss the possibility that he is.
that he is useless.
That he is a useless human being. That's how he'll know that I'm not just trying to cheer him up. It's been bugging me ever since. Although I've agreed, I really can't find in me any part that is ready to think that he's a useless human being. I strongly believe he's not a useless person. I can't imagine labeling anyone in that way, and in his case, it feels so personal, as I like him very much and I care about him. I'm starting to have dreams about our next session when I fail him by trying to convince him to think as I do.
In other words, this therapist is trying to convince her patient that he's not useless. She wants him to think in the same way that she thinks.
Yeah. How can I be open about our conclusion when my mind is already fixed? Any thoughts on this would be deeply appreciated. And this is best wishes from Poland.
And Karolina.
Karolina.
Which is a good Polish name, I'm sure. And we're getting podcast listeners from all over the world and questions now from all over the world as well, which is another neat thing. We will touch base on two aspects of this. And again, if you go to the show notes on my website, you'll always get a lot more material on any of these topics that interest you, links and, you know, the letters I write back to people with the full answers. But there's two parts to the answer. The first has to do with what I call, I don't want this to sound too hurtful, but the therapist codependency / narcissism, and what is the most common therapeutic error of all, and what is the cause of nearly all therapeutic failure. And that's the failure to set an agenda with the patient, to work with the patient on something the patient wants to work on, and the failure to melt away the patient's resistance. And in this case, what we're talking about is the patient is saying, I'm a useless human being. That's his depressed thought. And his therapist is foolishly falling into the trap of trying to help him. And that's a guarantee, that strategy is guaranteed to fail, and we'll show why, and we'll show how to stop doing that. But out of kindness, I want to say that this is a mistake that even I make sometimes, as recently as a Sunday hike, when I was trying to help someone who had been rejected by his girlfriend, and I was kind of throwing out all this advice and stuff, and it really wasn't working. He wasn't buying what I was trying to sell.
Right.
And it didn't dawn on me till after the hike that
Yeah.
I had made the exact error that we're going to talk about in today's broadcast. And fortunately, I emailed him, and he's going to come back for another hike next week, and I'll correct this error. But that's half of what we're going to talk about, is this trying to help people without melting away their resistance to change. And then the second thing, in the event this fellow did want help with this thought, and he very well may not want help with this thought, then what techniques can you use to help a person crush a thought like, I'm a useless human being, or I'm a worthless human being, or I'm inferior, or you know, I'm a hopeless individual. All these overgeneralized statements, or that have overgeneralization or labeling. What's the best way to crush those kinds of negative thoughts?
What are the best methods to use after she's melted away the resistance?
Yeah. So.
But then there's a third way that you started to talk about, and that is, how is the therapist's attitude of wanting to help? How might that sometimes get in the way of the patient's success in crushing these thoughts?
Yeah, and that again is the cause of almost all therapeutic failure. If you're a therapist, it's your compulsion to help your patients that causes all the therapeutic failure you have. And therapeutic failure is defined as anything other than super high-speed total recovery.
And we were talking earlier before we started recording that what you're teaching about how not to help is really breaking the norm from everything that we've been taught when we were in, even undergraduates, if we studied psychology and sociology. But in graduate school, it's all about how do you help? How do you help? So what you're asking us to do is, break that norm and, sit with open hands and not try to help. And it's radically different. And sometimes it's really hard.
Yeah. In fact, most therapists are not able to learn this and won't be able to. That's why I'm creating a new app now. I've decided to stop training therapists and start curing people in masses. And so Jeremy Carmel and I are developing an app. You'll hear more about this in future podcasts. So we're going to teach all of you to melt away your own therapeutic resistance and change your own negative thoughts. Hopefully, anyway, that's our plan, and we'll be wanting people to help us out and
give you feedback.
Test our prototype that we're working on.
But no offense, David, I'm happy you're doing this app, but I don't want you to eliminate the entire field of psychology.
No, we'll still be using human therapists as helpers to the app.
So one of the things we also wanted to have Karolina listen to is the episode 164, which we just did last month, which was all about how to help and how not to help. And that's gotten a lot of feedback for being
that's one of our actually most
popular,
positively regarded podcasts so far. So tell us about how would I, if I'm the therapist, I have this patient who says he's useless, what would be an effective way to work on him using TEAM?
I think you'd start at the very beginning and ask him to come up with a moment in time when that thought was disturbing him or when that thought came up for him. Like, we can't help people every moment of every moment of their life, but we could focus on one brief moment in time when that thought was disturbing to him.
And that would be illuminating, because then he might have a daily mood log and an event, and where is he? Maybe something bad happened at school or at work, or he failed at something, and then he'd have all these negative emotions.
Where is he? Who he's with? What's going on?
Well, that would be a second and radically different possibility. But to stick with the first one of the daily mood log, this is the individual perspective, and that's the interpersonal perspective. And they're both important, but on the individual perspective, he'd have a lot of feelings on that daily mood log that he'd circle: sad, guilty, anxious, ashamed, inadequate, alone, frustrated, hopeless.
Did you mention angry?
Angry, discouraged. And then he'd have a lot of negative thoughts, one of which would be, I'm a useless human being, and there may be many others. There's no hope for me. I'll never get better. I should be better than I am. That would be one piece of information. Or the moment, the fractal, so to speak, that moment that we want to focus on might be an interpersonal thing where he's mad at someone, or he's not getting along with someone. Instead of dealing with that problem, he's kind of withdrawing and saying, I'm a useless human being, and feeling secretly angry and maybe feeling sorry for himself or whatever. So once we have that information, the full picture, then we'd empathize without trying to help him, and saying things like what?
It sounds so painful to hear how these thoughts are really causing so much pain for you.
Yeah, and I would say, and I've had at times thoughts like that myself, that I'm not good enough, or that I'm useless, that I'm over the hill, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're feeling down and depressed and inadequate and worthless. And is this true? And can you tell me more? And during this empathy phase, what are some things we're definitely not going to do, Rhonda?
We're not going to give him advice. We're not going to try and cheer him up. We're not going to tell him that it's not true, that he's worthless, and try to talk him out of it.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, is this podcast today, is this only for therapists?
No, this is for anyone.
Yeah, right. Because if you're a parent,
a friend,
or you're probably trying to help your children, and you're probably failing.
Right.
And if you have a friend who's upset, a colleague, you may make the same mistake. And so these tips, while we're directing them at psychotherapy, this is for everybody. So I love what you're saying there. So how would we find out, Rhonda, if we're doing a good job on empathy, whether you're a parent or a therapist?
Well, we just ask, how am I doing for empathy? And ask the person, how well are you feeling understood by me? And even ask them to give you a grade, like what grade would you give me for empathy?
I love that, and say, am I getting an A, a B, a C? And you have to ask for a letter grade because otherwise the person will say, oh, you're doing fine. Whereas if you ask for a letter grade, they might say, oh, it's about a B, and that means you're
Yeah.
really kind of missing the boat.
Yeah.
And you say, can you tell me the part that I'm missing? Let's assume that Karolina and our listeners can get an A in empathy. Then what do we do next?
Then we ask them, well, I'm assuming that we've already asked them the miracle question about what they wanted to get.
No,
No?
there's an invitation question first, and it's either a straightforward or a paradoxical invitation.
So we're going to ask them if this is something that they want to work on, if it's something that they want to work on now, or maybe it's something they want to work on later, or maybe it's not something that they want to work on.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect. And I think I might myself, it depends on the data I have and the feel I get for the patient, but it sounds like he's pretty determined to cling to this belief that he's useless. And so I might dangle the carrot and then give what's called a paradoxical invitation. I might say something like this. Let's say his name is Jim. I don't know what male names are in Poland. I'm sure it's not Jim. But let's just give him the name Jim.
Okay.
I might say, Jim, you've been telling me how painful it is for you and how depressed you've been feeling, and the fact that you're telling yourself that you're a useless human being, and how demoralizing that is, and how devastated you feel. You've also told me that you're a little worried. I'll try to talk you out of that. And I want you to know that I've got some terrific tools. If you did want to work with me on that thought, I think we could do some great work. But what I'm hearing from you is that maybe that's not something that we should be working on together. Tell me if I'm reading you right. Is that true that we maybe this wouldn't be the thing you'd want to work on in today's therapy session? How's that?
That sounds good.
Why?
Because you're giving him the option of working on it or not working on it. You're doing that without any judgment or pushing him in one direction or the other. You're giving him complete free rein.
Yes, that's right. And then one of two things might happen. He might say, you're right, I don't want to work on it, in which case you can sit with open hands and say, what?
Okay, well, is there something else I could help you with?
Yeah, and then this gets you all out of that loop of arguing with someone who's got their heels dug in. But this also speaks to the philosophy behind TEAM, which is the same one that the Dalai Lama came to learn from you when you were in India, the idea of emptiness.
Right.
And how does that relate to TEAM-CBT, what we're trying to teach today?
Uh-huh. Well, the concept of emptiness is a concept where you can sit in a moment without judging yourself or judging others, or without having distortions about what your experience is or what your thoughts are, where you're just able to be in the moment.
Yes, that's huge. That's huge.
It's huge, and it's really difficult.
Oh, yeah. Well, except once you get into it, it's real easy. But when you're not into it, it seems awfully hard. But also the idea of not having an agenda for other people. In other words, can we sit with open hands? That's why you see all these statues of the Buddha, he's sitting with open hands.
Right.
And what the open hands means, and I'm sure the Dalai Lama mentioned this in his talks, is that I can receive you and show you the path to enlightenment if you want, but I can also let you go,
right,
because I don't have a hidden agenda. My ego doesn't require you to be my disciple.
Exactly.
And that's what we're trying to get therapists to do. Many therapists are unwilling to go there because they want to be codependent. They want to be in control. They want to be experts. They want to tell people what to do. The therapist wouldn't admit it or put it in those words, but that's where
they also
at.
want to have their ongoing therapy relationship so they can make a living.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is not a bad thing, but but like Matt May talks about, he's such a great therapist, and he eliminate, he, and you've talked about this too, that you heal people so quickly, you have to, have a constant flow of new patients.
Yeah, except for me, since I don't charge anything, I'm not going to lose any money if people get well. So I don't mind if I can get them well in a single session.
Yeah.
It makes me high. But if you're depending on making your living, you may not be so motivated. But at any rate, what usually happens when you sit with open hands and say to the patient, maybe this isn't something you want to work on, and I would be totally cool with that. Generally, then they do want to work with you.
Yeah, because you're also eliminating a power struggle.
Yeah, and you're becoming, and we're going to even do more, you're going to become the patient's resistance. Now, let's say the patient says, well, yes, maybe this is something I do want help with, because I'm just depressed all the time. Then we might go to your miracle cure question, which would be,
well, if we had the most miraculous therapy session in the world, how would your life be different at the end of this session? I mean, what would be changed?
well, I guess all these negative thoughts and feelings would disappear, doctor.
Well, then
I'd be happy and joyous instead of feeling like a useless, worthless, hopeless human being.
Okay, well, can you write that down?
Write down what?
Write down what you just said, what your goal is. Actually, that's what I would say. Okay, let's write that down so we can come back to it and see.
Yeah, right. And then I might say to the patient, well, suppose we have a magic button here, and if you press this magic button, all your negative thoughts and feelings will instantly disappear with no effort on your part, and you'll walk out of today's session in a state of euphoria. And all these thoughts about being worthless and useless and hopeless will be gone, and all the negative feelings will be gone. Will you press that button? And almost all patients will say yes. I'd press that button, and then what would we
you could say, gosh, I might be kind of reluctant to ask you to push that magic button or have you push the magic button, because I can see that these challenging feelings and negative thoughts say really beautiful things about you, or maybe they speak to the ways that you're protecting yourself, or maybe they speak to your core values of who you are as a person. Let's try to identify some of those.
Yeah, before we press that magic button. And sometimes I even say we don't have any magic button, but we got some awesome techniques, and I have no doubt if we work together we can reduce your negative thoughts and feelings, and it's possible. In fact, I predict by the end of the session they all will disappear. But I don't think we should press that magic button. I don't think we should use those techniques. And then the patient starts fighting. So, well, why not? That's what I need. And then I would just say, well, what you just stated so beautifully, because maybe these negative thoughts and feelings are showing really beautiful and awesome things about you and your core values. Maybe there's tremendous benefits for you. And before we go around blasting these negative thoughts and making these negative feelings disappear, maybe we should see what these negative thoughts and feelings are trying to tell us about you. And now we can't do a total job on this, but we can give our listeners a good Whitman sampler. We don't know all of his negative feelings and all of his negative thoughts. We just know a tiny little bit. But
and they're really specific to the person, so we don't know what he's going through.
Right, but we do know that he's telling himself he's a useless human being, and he's feeling depressed and ashamed and inadequate and alone and lonely and worthless and frustrated and hopeless and so forth. So we have quite a bit to work with. What are some benefits of him telling himself that he's a useless human being?
Well, it sounds like he has really high standards for himself, and he's not living up to his high standards. So I'd ask him, if he has high standards, and if having high standards is an important value that he has.
Yeah.
Is it important to him that he has high standards? Is that
Right.
a good thing?
Right. Now, you listeners might want to write this down if you have a pen and paper. I just put the word positives at the top of a piece of paper, and we list them. So, and I'm sure he'd say, yes, I do have high standards. And then I would say to him, have those high standards motivated you to work hard and accomplish a lot? He would, undoubtedly say yes. And then I would say, is that important to have high standards and to motivate yourself and to work hard? And you would say yes, and I would say, is that real? And is that important? So he sees that these two things we've written down and all the rest of the things we're going to write down, all the rest of the positives, are really really awesome things. And what else, Jim, does it say about you that you say you're a useless human being? Because this is telling me a lot of really beautiful things about you.
Well, it tells me that he really values what people think about him.
Okay, let's. Is that true, Jim? Do you value what people think about you?
I do. I value it a lot.
Oh, okay. Let's put that down. I value what others think about me. And are you also saying that you value good relationships with others?
I do.
Is that a good thing?
That's a really good thing.
Is that real?
It's very real.
Is that important?
Really important.
Okay, I value loving relationships, and also you indicated on the daily mood log that you feel lonely, and is that a part of that too, that you're yearning for relationships, but you sometimes feel you're not good enough to be loved?
Yeah, I'm yearning for a good relationship. I value that.
Yeah.
I like relationships.
What else does this whole system of negative thoughts and feelings saying I'm useless show about you that's beautiful and awesome, Jim?
It shows that I want to add value to the world. I want to do.
Oh, is that true?
It is true.
Oh, is that good?
Yeah, it's really good.
Put that down. I want to add value. Now I'll tell you another one that I just thought of. Would you say that you project yourself as very arrogant or humble?
Humble.
Yeah, and actually that's one of the things I really love about you, Jim. Is you are very humble, and I find that refreshing and very, very appealing, particularly in an era where we so many people fighting and thinking they're better than other people.
Right. Yeah.
And if this is what depression does to people, make them humble the way you are, maybe we shouldn't cure depression, but should try to spread some more depression. Because what an awesome person you are. What are some more really beautiful things about you? And then we would just go through, what is the hopelessness? What's good about that? Well, it protects me from disappointment. We would say, you don't get your hopes up. Also, this thought that I'm useless shows that you're very realistic and honest with yourself, right?
Right.
Rather than spinning tales. Whoops! I dropped my microphone. Rather than spinning tales about yourself, and it also shows perhaps that you're accountable rather than blaming the world. Right. What
you're willing to take your own. You're accountable to yourself. You're willing to face your own life.
Yeah. I'm the useless one. I'm the one who needs to change.
You're willing to take responsibility for your life.
Yeah. Right. Oh, right. Great. Yeah. Accountable and responsible. And so you see what we're doing, and we just have a tiny piece of the pie here because we don't have the context, we don't have the daily mood log, but we can be doing this with the sadness. What does the sadness show about him? The depression, well, it shows that he has a passion for having a meaningful life.
Right.
And his sadness shows his passion. And if he didn't have the sadness and the depression, he'd be saying, yeah, I'm a useless human being, but I don't give an SH, I don't give a darn about it. And then he'd be very, very callous. And so his depression shows his sensitivity and his commitment to life and to finding a meaningful life. Also, this thought shows that he's a bit of a philosopher. What is a useful human being? What is a useless human being? Does my life have meaning? So we would easily come up with a list of 20 or 25, even more than 30 beautiful and awesome things about this
Yeah, because
guy.
we just whipped out 10 in about 5 minutes.
Huh?
We just whipped out 10 in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And we don't even know his situation.
Exactly. And then what I would say would be, well, Jam, I'm a little confused now because if you press that magic button, all these beautiful things about you are going to go down the drain along with your negative thoughts and feelings. Why in the world would you want to do something like that? That just makes no sense.
Right. Why would you push the magic button and get rid of all these beautiful protective values that you have?
Yeah. And then one of two things will happen. The thing that usually happens, I would say 90% of the time or more, is the patient starts protesting and says, yes, but I'm suffering so much. And then you can go on to the magic dial and just say, well, maybe instead of pressing the magic button, we can have a magic, imagine there's a magic dial, and you could dial each negative emotion down to some number that would allow you to keep all these beautiful qualities without suffering so much. I noticed, Jim, your depression is 90%. Sometimes you say it's 100%. What would be an ideal amount of depression, given that you haven't found the meaning yet in your life, and things aren't always going so well for you? Would you want to have 10% or 30%?
I think I'd need 20%.
20, that sounds good. Let's put down 20, and then we'd have them write this down on his daily mood log as his goal for depression. And how ashamed would you want to feel? You say you're 100% ashamed.
I don't want to feel ashamed. I'd say 5%.
5, that's plenty. That's what I'm sure what the Dalai Lama said in his talk there in India. Like 5% shame is sufficient for anybody, except for certain people we know, who I won't say. I don't want to get into politics and won't, although I just did. But, and then how lonely do you want to feel? How inadequate do you want to feel? How hopeless do you want to feel? How angry do you want to feel? And have him dial all those down. And now,
and I just want to say it's really interesting because maybe someone might say I don't want to feel lonely at all. And someone else, so I want to be 5% or 2%, but somebody else might say, well, I find loneliness to be motivating, so I want to keep that higher, at 20%. So, you have to really be careful that it's an individual process.
Absolutely. And again, what we're happening here is we're becoming the patient's resistance. See, this therapist, Karolina, she's fighting with his resistance. What we're doing is the opposite. We are merging with his resistance. I have become the resistant Jim. You see.
And we're honoring it. We're not saying there's something wrong with it.
Yeah. And so then that's the end of this part of the therapy we call TEAM. Team A is assessment of resistance. And now we're ready to go on to methods. Now there's a remote chance that he would say, after we list all these positives, he might say, well, yes, I want to continue to believe that I'm worthless, and I want to continue to be depressed. And then we would say, what?
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's fine.
That's fine.
Anything else you want to work on. So either way, you don't get into a battle with the patient. Now, we're running out of time here, although I've been loving this podcast. And Karolina, I'm so appreciative of this great question. Let's just give we have a little time
because we
still.
We spent a long time in the beginning talking about sort of administrative stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's talk a little bit. Now, let's say he really does want help. Then we would put and he wants help with the thought, I'm a useless human being. Then we would put that in the middle of a recovery circle, and there's arrows coming out of a recovery circle. Maybe I'll try to put one in the podcast show notes or something. And we would select at least 10 or 15 or 20 techniques from my list of 50 ways to untwist your thinking. It's 100 now, 100 ways, 100 techniques. What techniques can we use to help him crush this thought? And then we'd go through them one at a time until he's able to crush the thought. And crush the thought means come up with a thought that challenges, that combats this thought, I'm a useless human being. And to be effective, the positive thought has to be 100% true, and it has to drastically lower his belief in the negative thought. Now, the first technique we always start out with is identify the distortions. And let's see what the distortions are in this thought. And in fact, we can go through the distortions one by one, and we'll let the listeners decide whether each one is present in the thought. So we'll give them just a second to figure it out. Now, the first one is all or nothing thinking. That's where you're looking at things in black and white categories. Would you say this is an example of all or nothing thinking? And you can just write down yes or no. If you have a paper or pencil for distortion number one. Distortion number 2 is overgeneralization.
And maybe when the listener writes yes or no, they could also ask themselves, why is it an example of all or nothing thinking? Or why is it an example of whatever the distortion is?
Yeah, if you want to turn off the podcast for a moment and write that out, that would be a terrific exercise for you. Now, the second distortion to consider, yes or no, would be overgeneralization. That's where you generalize from, say, a failure I'm having right now to seeing your whole self as a failure. And overgeneralization is always also when you project into the future from this moment, like Trisha rejected me, so I'll be alone and unlovable forever. That would be overgeneralization. Is this thought, I'm a useless human being, is that an overgeneralization? And then the next two distortions are mental filter and discounting the positive. Mental filter is where you pick out all the negatives about yourself, and discounting the positive is where you think that your positive qualities don't count. Should we go through all 10 or just discuss these and then give the answers on the rest?
Let's just discuss these.
Okay, well, let's go to the first one. Was it an all or nothing thinking?
I think it is all or nothing thinking.
It is, and tell us why.
Because he's saying, I'm a useless human being, and there's no room for shades of gray or subtleties where he's, other qualities that he has.
Yeah.
He's not only useless or only useful.
No one's totally useful or useless.
It's a continuum.
It's somewhere in between. Like our podcast isn't like incredibly brilliant, and it's not horribly horrific. It's somewhere in between. How about and that's important because the world doesn't consist of black and white.
Right.
And all of depression pretty much results from all or nothing thinking. And it's when you have an all or nothing thought, it doesn't match on to reality. You're conning yourself. It's an untruthful message you're giving yourself. Is it an overgeneralization?
I think it is.
I think so too. Tell us why.
Do you think so? Because he's generalizing from whatever negative thing he's experienced, one negative thing, to a huge definition of who he is as a person.
Yeah.
And he's also, what you described, he's predicting into the future that he's always going to be useless.
Yeah, he's going to be useless at everything all the time, and that he has a self that's useless. And that's also always present in depression. All depression results from some kind of overgeneralization. It's not that he's not upset because he's having trouble. Like when we had the electricity go out, my wife and I decided to go out for dinner because we couldn't cook.
Right.
And the garage was all dark, and we tried to open the garage door. And I couldn't get it open. I was tugging and tugging. I figured it was an electronic lock on it. And then my wife came, and we were tugging and pushing and pulling, and we could not get the door open. And we finally gave up and, just had some cereal or something for dinner. And we felt really, really useless, and we were pretty useless. And the funny thing is, when the electricity came on, the next day I went out to see what was wrong, and I pressed the electronic thing for the door, and I found out it doesn't go up, it goes out. And then it goes up. And we were pulling up. If we just pushed it forward, it would have gone right up.
Interesting.
You see. So we felt, pretty useless at that moment. Almost anyone could have figured that out, but we're kind of mechanically inadequate, or a little less adequate. But it's an overgeneralization because, see, we weren't upset.
But you didn't generalize that to your future.
Or to ourselves. We were just saying, we were laughing at it. We're really inept at this. And my wife's really smart. I'm pretty smart. And it seemed funny to us that we couldn't open a garage door.
Yeah.
But when you say, oh, and I'm a stupid person, I'm a useless person, that's when you're involved in a distortion. That's when your pain comes. How about the mental filter and discounting the positive? How are those working?
So the mental filter is when you're focusing on the negative, and he seems to completely be focusing on the negative, saying he's only identifying with the negatives of himself, but being useless. And
he's probably thinking about all the things he doesn't do very good at.
Right.
He's not very good at.
So he's looking for data to prove that he's useless.
Yeah.
And the discounting the positives, he's not doing the opposite. He's not saying, well, wait a minute, but I'm a good dancer, or I'm good at this,
or even the fact that I've raised this philosophical question shows that I'm kind of have a tremendous integrity and all this list of positives we came. I'm kind of a philosopher, and I'm kind of honest with myself, and I have a number of skills that are very very important. And then we could also just say, to speed this up, it's a hidden should statement. What's the hidden should?
I should be useful. I shouldn't be useless.
And I should be better than I am, and I'm not good enough. And then it's self-blame, because he's blaming himself. It's labeling. He's labeling himself as useless.
He's probably magnifying it.
Yeah, it's magnification and minimization, blowing his shortcomings out of proportion and minimizing his strengths. And it's emotional reasoning. He's saying, I am useless because I feel useless.
Right.
So we've right there come up with 9 cognitive distortions. And then there are many other techniques we could use: paradoxical double standard technique, downward arrow, hidden emotion, externalization of voices, acceptance paradox, self-defense paradigm, examine the evidence, semantic methods, and so on. But one really cool method is that we can demonstrate right now is called let's define terms. And I didn't used to think this was a very good technique, except I talked to Jill Levitt, who we both know, who we're about to go over to Stanford and teach with Jill in our weekly Tuesday group. It's called Let's Define Terms, and there's a new way to do it. But essentially, when you have these overgeneralized concepts or labels, like I'm a useless human being, or I'm a worthless human being, or I'm a bad mother, you try to define the term. And you discover that however you define it, one of 5 things will hold true. The definition will apply to all human beings, in which case we don't need to worry about it. Or the definition, in this case, of a useless human being will apply to no human beings, in which case we don't need to worry about it. Or the definition will not apply to this fellow. Or the definition doesn't make sense, it's meaningless. Or the definition is based on some kind of arbitrary cutoff points. That's how you do let's define terms. But to make it dramatic and emotional and helpful, you do it as a double standard technique. So if I'm the therapist and you're Jim, I might say, Jim, imagine I'm a friend of yours, and I'm trying to figure out if I'm a useless human being. And can you help me with that? Can you tell me how could I figure out if I'm a useless human being? What is a useless human being?
Well, a useless human being is someone that doesn't contribute to society.
Okay, so a useless human being, would that be, you have to contribute to all of society all of the time, or some of society some of the time?
Some of society, some of the time.
Yeah, well then all human beings are not useless, because we all contribute something to somebody at some time or other. So I guess then I'm not a useless human being, and there are no useless human beings.
Okay.
Do you say?
Yeah.
Now what would be another definition?
Well, I don't have a very...
Say you don't. You're talking to me.
I'm Jim. I don't...
No, you talk to me. You're Jim.
I'm Jim, and I'm talking
to Jim's
you.
Friend. Well,
Okay, so well, you don't have children.
So you're saying anyone without children is a useless human being, like Jesus?
That sounds ridiculous. So no.
So that definition just doesn't make sense.
Okay. Well, you don't like your job. You don't make very much money.
Well, those are 2 different things. Let's talk about liking the job first and making money second. Or which one do you want to focus on?
You don't make much money.
Okay. So how much money would I have to make in order to be a useful human being? How many dollars a year? What's the income of a useful versus a useless human being?
Well, you have to make enough to support yourself so that you're not in debt. So
I see. So anyone who's in debt is a useless human being?
Yeah. No.
Every college graduate in the United States.
Yeah.
So that doesn't make
make sense.
But maybe there's a certain income level.
Yeah, okay, $75,000 a year.
So if I make $75,001, I'm a useful human being. If I make $64,999, I'm a useless human being.
Well, that sounds ridiculous too.
Yeah, because that's virtually the identical amount of money, and
Yeah.
that's the arbitrary cutoff point. And what you want the person to see is there is no such thing as a useless human being. That's just a mean thing to say. It's just like kicking someone in the stomach. That's the only meaning it has, is to say, I'm going to be mean to you right now. Like that's what bullies say, but that the term has no meaning at all. And the recovery from depression is not going from being useless and decide I'm useful, because that's just out of the frying pan into the fire. That's another
Right.
abstract concept.
Yeah.
But rather to focus on life, on living. Like right now, I, David, am working with you, Rhonda, my good friend, and someone I admire and like hanging out with, and we're having fun. And we're trying to convey some useful information to people. We're not trying to be great human beings. We're not trying to avoid being worthless human beings. And we're not trying to be useful human beings. We're in the process of life and sharing our ideas. And to me, this is very rewarding, but I won't feel like I'm better. Now, if some people like the podcast, that'll be wonderful, feel terrific. And if some people say, oh, it was too long, or it was too boring, or too this, or too that, I won't feel less worthwhile, but I'll say, here's some things to change in the next podcast. And
great.
That's pretty much all she wrote.
Oh my gosh, I hope that Karolina listens to this podcast and emails you and lets us know how it impacted her.
Yeah, and all of you who write questions, thank you, because I get excited by your questions. It inspires me. It allows us to teach in a really interactive way. And one quick commercial message, and then we're out of here. And we have workshops coming up, 2 one day with David and Jill on February 9th, 2020. It's high-speed methods to reduce therapeutic resistance and boost motivation. That's what we went over in today's podcast, by the way, and we're going to have a full-day program on that for mental health professionals. You can come in person, or you can, which will be awesome, because if you come in person, they have wonderful breakfast, wonderful lunch. It's kind of a potluck, and we all bring something awesome.
Yeah, and actually everybody who's a part of the TEAM community, whether it's online or in person, I've found them to be really kind, compassionate, wonderful people. So it's really fun to meet each other.
Oh yeah, it's just a great day. I love these one-day workshops in Palo Alto. And then if you can't come in person, you can join online. And Mike Christensen from Canada organizes all the online helpers. So when we have small group exercises, when you're online, you'll also be able to go into a virtual room with other people to practice the exercises and get mentoring and feedback. So that's February 9th, 2020, and to learn more and register, go to my website, feelinggood.com, and then go to the workshop tab, and then you'll find the description of this workshop, and you can click on the link if you want to register or get specific details, costs. But I know there's 7 CE hours, and I know the online is 135, and I think the in-person is more expensive, but I don't recall the in-person cost. But that's ballpark at any rate. And then on May 17th, 2020, the Cognitive Distortion Starter Kit, How to Crush Negative Thoughts. That again will be with Dr. Jill Levitt and myself. May 17th, a full day. You can come in person or join online. And again, it's 7 continuing education credit hours. And if you go to my website, feelinggood.com, go to the workshop tab, and you can read all about it and register if you're interested. We'd love to see you. The in-person slots are limited to about 40 people, and they always seem to sell out early. So if you want to come in person, make sure you move quickly. So that's about it, Rhonda. Any other words of wisdom?
Well, I just want to say that we're just shooting this stuff off really rapidly and making it sound kind of easy, but it's actually really, I don't want to discourage people, but it's difficult to learn. And coming to these one-day workshops is really, really, really helpful to integrate the information into your life and into your practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely well stated. And we hope you're all feeling good. And when my new book comes out in 2020, going to be called Feeling Great, we hope you'll be able to use that book to feel even better, to feel great. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Until next week.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.
For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this episode under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. The theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good Podcast.